first things first, you want to download an IDE. IDEs are what allows you to compile your code. It's what allows you to turn your code into actuation. So for C#, we're going to be using Visual Studio, and the way we get Visual Studio is just going onto your browser, whatever search engine you use. I'm using Google Chrome in my case, and you just type in Visual Studios. It should come up with the first link that leads you to the official website. It's made by Microsoft, so it'll take you to the official Microsoft website. Depending on what platform or what operating system that you use, you want to download the complementing Visual Studio's version for it. If you run on Mac OS, you want to get one for Mac OS. If you run on Linux, you want to get one for Linux. We're going to be going for the Windows version because we are using the Windows operating system. So you want to click on Community 2019 because that's the latest version. Click on that, and then it should automatically start the download right here. As soon as that downloads, you want to click that, open that up. It would ask you to run this, and then you click on yes, and then continue. I'm not going to go through the whole process of installation because I already have this on my computer, but typically on your first time you should be greeted with this Windows installer. If you're running this for the first time, you should be greeted with this Windows, and this would have all the potential frameworks that you can download with Visual Studios. But for a beginner, you really don't need any of these apart from this and the first one. Realistically, you don't really need this except you're going to go into web development later. But for a beginner, the basics that you need is just the .NET desktop development. Tick on that and then press install, and that should start installing that for you. And then you just have to wait for that to finish installing. Okay, so if your Visual Studios is finished installing, you would be greeted with this Windows. If you're opening this for the first time, you wouldn't have any projects or recent files or projects open underneath here. You'd want to create a new project by clicking on this. I already have a project, but you click on create a new project, and then click on console application. Click on that, then press next, and then name your application and choose where you want to save it, and then press next, and that should open up your project. I'm not going to make a new one because I already have one. So that should open up this page. This window should be what you see as your first page. So because we're talking about variables today, I'm just going to go ahead and explain what a variable is. A variable is something like a container that allows you to store information and data for you to be reusable later on in your code. And typically when you're dealing with variables, there are 3 steps that you have to go through. The first step is declaration. Second step is naming, and the third step is assigning. So we're going to go through all the steps and show you how they work. So in C#, the declaration aspect of variables allows you to say what type of variable or what type of data is going to be stored, and somewhere on the screen to the right, I'm going to put a screenshot of all the types of variables that you can have in C#. I'll put it on the right side of the screen. So we can have int to signify integers. We can have string to signify a string of text. We can have char or char for characters. We can have long for long numbers. We can have short for short numbers. We can have doubles. I really can't type today, kind of doubles. We can have what other ones? Decimals. We can have float. That should be double, not doubles. Double. We can have there's a whole bunch, and then we can also have the yes or no, which would be boolean. We can have bool, and this is for yes or no. So int typically is for just standalone integers ranging from 0 to 255. String is usually just a string of text. Character is just individual characters like letters. Long are usually for long integers, short for short integers, double are for extremely large numbers, decimals, obviously decimals, floats are usually encompassing decimal places, but long, big, huge decimal numbers. Bool are just for yes or no. So we're gonna, you know what, I'm gonna comment this out and we can go through each of this one after the other. So that's for declaration. So the declaration would be just you put in the name of what type of data is going to be stored, and that's it. That's declaration done. You've literally just completed the first one. And then for naming is then assigning a name. So in this case we would call this numbers, and that's naming done. And then assigning is then assigning what data you want to assign to that variable. So in our case we're going to assign 4, and that's that done. You've created a variable. So we have a declared variable of int and the name of numbers and the assigned data of 4. Let's do that again. Int age 23. We've got another assigned variable. So we have declared an int variable and given it a name of age and assigned 23 to it. This is a variable, and that's for integers. If we're going to do one for string, we just need to declare it, string, and then call it name, and then say Daniel. However, in string, you have to put every data in quotation marks, and I say Daniel as the name of the string, and then you finish it off with semicolon, and that's a variable done. We'll do another one for string. What should we say? We'll say surname, and then say Jones as a surname, and finish it off. Note that you always finish a line with semicolon. Always finish a line with semicolon. When you write a line of code, you have to finish it off with semicolon, so the program knows that you're reading a new line. So that's for string. Now we're going to char or char. You do pretty much the same thing. You declare it by saying char, and then you give it a name, letter, and then you assign. However, in char you only use single quotations and not double quotes. You use single quotes and you assign it a, and that's the assignment done. So you remember, you always have to go through the first 3 stages when it comes to, making or creating a variable. First stage would be the declaration, which is this, and then you have the naming, and then you have the assignment. The declaration is usually really important when it comes to making a variable, because you need to let the computer know what type of data is being stored in this variable, and that's why we always declare. You can also be lazy and just say var. This is a universal name for any variable. So I can say var and say nums for short for numbers, and just assign a number to it, and the variable will automatically know that this num is an int. So if you put a var before any variable name and put something inside that variable, provided you put in the right format, the computer would automatically know what it is. And I'll show you what I mean again by saying var and saying shop, and I'll put Tesco in there, and that automatically tells the computer that this is a string, this is a type string. So if I hover around this, see, it tells me it's a type string. If I hover around this, it tells me it's an integer. Let's do that again for character. Var letter, and if I've put in the right format and I've put D in there, it's going to tell the computer that this is a type character. Look, you can see there, car is the type of child letters. So if you want to be lazy, you could just use this and just avoid the part of you actually declaring the individual names. However, it's good practice to actually use the name for more clarity when it comes to writing code or clean code. So we're going to keep going and then do for long. Now for long, you can just simply do the same thing, long, and then put the name of the long numbers is equal to, for longs, for integers and anything that's to do with numbers, you don't really need to put them in quotation marks. You can just write the numbers out. So I'm gonna write the number out and then finish it out, and then the computer automatically know that this is a long. And then I can do the same thing for doubles. Doubles 0.4. The computer automatically knows that it's a double. I can do the same thing for a decimal. Decimal numbers 2.35. The computer automatically knows that this is a decimal. Okay, you see we've got an error here. That's because for decimal numbers you have to put a letter at the end of it, M, to let it know that it's a decimal, or else you're gonna have an error, like a red underline underneath. So for decimal and float, you have to put letters behind them. So for float numbers, we're gonna put and then put F at the end of it. F signifies that it's a float. M signifies that it's a decimal. If you don't put those letters at the end of these numbers, you're gonna get an error, like a red squiggly line underneath them, saying it's an error. The reason why we have all these lines underneath these variables that we've created is because these variables have not been used. So if I put my cursor around it, it says that the variable numbers is assigned, but the value is never used. So if I decide to use it later and say numbers is now equal to plus numbers 23, all this line does is just add 23 to numbers. Now you can see the numbers has no underline underneath it because it's now being used. So this numbers now, every time it gets called down here, it adds 23 to 4, which is already the normal, the number that's been assigned to it initially. But anyways, just know that the reason why we've got this line, squiggly line underneath the variables that we created is because they're not being used at the moment. So okay, now in terms of naming, right, in C# there are a couple rules, well, two main rules when it comes to naming convention. We usually either use the camel case or we use the Pascal case. Pascal case. So camel case basically means I've tried to write it in the way that in the way that it would usually be. Camel case basically means that every time you write a name for a variable, you want to write it the first letter of the first word. If it's two words, the first letter would be lowercase and then the second letter would be uppercase. So in this case, if we're going to make a variable called camel case, camel, the first C in camel would be small letter, and then the second C for case would be uppercase, and that's camel case. But for Pascal case, the first letter of every word for that name, for that variable name, would be uppercase, like you've seen here already. So I would say Pascal. So the first letter for Pascal would be P and would be uppercase, and then the second letter would be uppercase as well. The first letter of the second word would be uppercase as well. So these are the two naming conventions that are typically always used in C#. So here looks like I've been going with the camel case naming convention. So the first letter is lowercase and then the second letter is uppercase. First letter is always lowercase, but the second word has an uppercase as the first letter. So those are the two naming conventions. Hopefully that's been really insightful. I'm going to turn this into a series where I'm just going to work through a whole bunch of basics in C# to help you grow your skills and become better at programming. Hopefully this helped you, understand a little bit more about how variables work. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell so you know when my next video goes up. Thank you. Peace.